I want to talk about the errors of Hollywood. I am the Uso Spicy Takes, and I'm going to be talking about the errors of Hollywood. So, as a child, I always wanted to be part of the industry, if you will. I studied every aspect camera work, how to write a script, how to do a camera shot, just about everything to make a movie. When it came to graduating film school, I decided not to go into it because everything around me began to change and I began to learn about the aspects and the problems with how Hollywood works. One of the few things I want to talk about is casting through nepotism or getting someone through people that you already know. I already know what nepotism is, and nepotism is being casted because you are a certain celebrity's or director's family member. If you're related to this particular actor or director, you are immediately casted. I was explaining to people that I know, and they said nepotism is through family, and I said it's also best friends. One of the few prime examples of nepotism through best friends is George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Just to point this out, I'm not hating on anyone. I love the directors. It's just how the system works, okay? When it comes to George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, they've been friends since forever. Starting off with Steven Spielberg, he was making movies already, as well as George Lucas. One of the few people that Steven Spielberg depended on is the composer John Williams. When Steven was making the blockbuster Jaws, he needed someone to write music to fit the scenes of a movie. When George Lucas came into working with Star Wars, Steven Spielberg immediately said, "Why don't you get John Williams to compose the music?" And along came the famous score for Star Wars to make the movie believable. Stephen, George, and John became the three bearded trio. From that point on, they started exchanging John Williams with other films that they've been creating. Not only is nepotism a problem, there's also the fact of superficial imagery and casting. Since the very beginning of movie making, they have a thing with demographics. If you're going to have a leading man, they need to be 40 years old or at least handsome. When it comes to the female written characters, they need to be either beautiful, 5 years younger, or sexy. To this day, Hollywood still keeps to that demographic. And if you're not fitting the description, like you're younger, much younger than the demographic, you're either sidelined or you're kicked out. The casting for Star Wars, as an example, is Mark Hamill's the leading actor who plays Luke Skywalker. And then we get Harrison Ford, who is the helping hand to help the hero, Luke Skywalker, that is. And then you have Carrie Fisher, who plays the leading lady to spread goodness through the world in the film. Now, this leads to my next problem with Hollywood, which also involves the word nepotism, and it's called picking favorites. After the franchise became very big, only Hollywood producers would look at the casting and say, like, hey, this is what we're going to do. They're just eyeballing people who are capable of selling a film. So they chose Harrison Ford to be the leading man for the next few films. And how does it affect the people who really sold the film? Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher, they have been sidelined because they don't have what it takes. In my eyes, I think it was the system of Hollywood that weren't ready for people in their mid-20s or late 20s to sell a film. Today, Hollywood now depends on actors in their 20s to sell a film. When it comes to casting today's actors, they have this thing called blank acting. They're not showing expressions, they're only using their voice to express. If I was a director and I said or explained a scene, like a fight scene, and if somebody gets hit, they won't show any expression, or if they get hit in the gut, it's just blank. I remember back in January, I was watching the movie Dune, Timothy Chalamet and Zendaya, the two prime examples of blank acting. They're there just to be a pretty face, and then you have their acting skills, which are not being put to the test. They're just faceless. If you pick a movie like The Ten Commandments or The King and I, all those actors are doing 50% facial features, expressing their emotions through their face, and using their voice. 50% of using their voice. And if you compare it to something like Dune, they were much better in the day than what we have now. Adding that all up, it all leads to the award shows. The award shows is something I now have a problem with. Because when you pick actors like Harrison Ford, Timothy Chalamet, they are focusing only on those actors. Like, they only want you to focus on those actors. One example I can give you is the movie Wicked and their success through the people who watched it. Now, I watched Wicked with my sister, and I was supporting the film because it was the best thing in forever. Everyone who made the film was at the event, but what happens with the awards when it comes to selling a film? It only goes to the favorites. Last year, Godzilla Minus One won the award for Best Visual Effects. Those are a group of people that were not known to the world, and now they are. So going back to this year's Oscars, they had a wicked opening number. They had all the cast members sitting, and all I kept doing was praying to see if Cynthia Erivo would get an Oscar. And obviously it didn't, because it went to some other actors who are already known. And to me, that's sort of insulting. To conclude this, Hollywood really needs to change. Everything I listed needs to be toned down at least 50%. This is only part one of Hollywood and what's wrong with it, because there's a lot more to Hollywood that you already know. If you guys are working in the system, then I hope it gets to you. I think if Hollywood goes back to the method of taking risks, then they would succeed with having great films in the future. Unknown actors, directors, and people who are really responsible for working behind the scenes. I hope you like this video, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.